Hi, Shriyam.
Hi, Vicar. How are you?
I am good. I'm good. So I think we're all set. We have all the panelists in place, and I think we can start the webinar.
Sounds good.
Can I switch off my video when? Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Shriyam.
No, can I switch off my video when the other panelists are presenting? Is that fine?
Yeah, please. Yeah, that's all right. That's all right.
Yeah. Fine.
Yes. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening. Everyone who's joined in. We just about 5 minutes waiting for all the other attendees to join in before we start rolling out our planned webinar. In the meantime, you can get yourself relaxed, get yourself a cup of coffee, some tea. We're going to have a very exciting line of panelists speaking on a very sensitive and important topic of the pandemic of coronavirus as a catalyst of the changing environment and the changing realities that we're going to face in the future that lies ahead of us. So just strap yourself in. We are rolling for a very exciting 2-hour session wherein you will be entertained, you'll be hearing so many insights on how a corporate world is going to respond to this beautiful and if not dangerous future that lies ahead of us. Strap yourself in. We'll be up in 2 minutes from now. Right, I think we'll set sail. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone who's joined in for today's webinar. I welcome everyone joining in for this webinar, also on the other platforms that we are live now on YouTube and Facebook as well. My name is Syed Zakharuddin Hussain. I'm a chartered accountant, a CIA, an MBA, and a risk management professional, having over 15 years of experience working across different industries. My core expertise lies with the defense mechanisms that organizations are involved in. However, for today, I'll be your host and moderator for this exciting webinar that we have planned. We're going to talk about basically the response of how individuals and professionals need to make out of a catastrophe or a pandemic like COVID-19. Before we step out on listening to our panelists, I hope everyone is keeping safe and healthy. And for people who've been affected by COVID, either professionally or personally, I wish them a very speedy recovery. And because this deadly catastrophe has caused a lot of mental and physical trauma to so many across the world. So I really wish them well. I really hope every one of you will be doing safe in the future and have a very exciting professional life ahead of you. Apologies for the deferral in the program ahead because it was originally planned for the 5th of December. However, due to certain unavoidable circumstances, we had to move it to the 19th of December. And trust me, it has no references to the date of 19 today. COVID-19 and December 19 has nothing in common. It's just that it happened on the 19th of this month. This webinar at the outset is being planned by the Club of Professionals, in short, the COPS. And this club primarily is a circuit of professionals who joined together for academic and educational purposes, for imparting knowledge and for creating a self-help group wherein people can talk about the challenging issues that they face across their professional and personal lives. So this circuit of professionals, also called a circuit of protectors, would carry out different seminars, webinars, and educational sessions all across the year of 2020 and 2021 for creating a self-help and a mutual awareness group wherein we can pose our queries, a question, try to better be informed in these challenging times. Before we get on to the webinar itself, a couple of housekeeping rules. We would like to keep this webinar as interactive as possible because we are having this webinar on a virtual platform. We, of course, cannot see our audience and attendees, but then the attendees will have a perfect involvement in this by asking queries, questions to each panelist individually or in general, so that each panelist can answer these questions after they have presented their papers. Some other housekeeping rules is that everyone would be on mute when the panelist is speaking. And of course, the attendees have the right to ask questions through the question answer session, the polls and the question answer forums available across the Zoom platform. So right on, I think we are pretty much set to start our webinar and go ahead and listen to our exciting list of panelists that we have in line today. Our panelists come from various industrial backgrounds and have proven their mettle and worth in many organizations and work of bodies that they have performed. It will be very, very interesting and enlightening for us to hear from each of them. And these panelists would, of course, enlighten us and guide us in terms of how better we should respond to this catastrophe of COVID and the world beyond. Now, and 2020, of course, has been an eventful year, a year that can be marked as one for the century, the one that will go into the books of history as a milestone that changed the way how people looked into corporate management and how risks can play an important role in defending organizations. But then, what exactly is risk? How exactly can organizations identify risk? And can a risk like COVID-19 be thought of beforehand? In hindsight, it's very easy for us to see what went wrong and what could have been possible. But then what we're trying to achieve here is how better we should be responding to emerging risks. Now, COVID-19 has been a watershed moment. It has brought about so many changes. But then I would want COVID-19 to be only a metaphor when we discuss what's next. Because in a corporate environment, we would always face challenges. Taking the case, for example, Nokia, had they not preempted or not guessed what was in the future, they would have not gone redundant now. So risk has always been there, but it's just been brought in the forefront when we have had this catastrophe of COVID-19. So all in all, we would like to hear from our panelists and the attendees in the audience can enjoy as to what lies ahead of us and how better can we equip ourselves, how better do we defend ourselves, how better do we protect ourselves from any risk, or how better can we prepare ourselves from a second wave or a third wave of COVID Before, we could not say that we were not prepared for a pandemic like this sort. But today, if we say that we are not prepared, that would not be an excuse that anyone would buy in. So at this background, I'd like to invite our first panelist, who is an expert on risks and who is a person who has done so much in his 30 years of experience that he'll be the best person to set out this webinar in enlightening us what exactly is risk, how exactly risks is identified, how exactly do we measure risk, because Mitchell has been involved more than 30 years with risk management and has decades of experience in banking, fintech, and more recently in payment technologies. Mitchell Hickman is a member in the Institute of Bankers in UK, and he's also a member of Institute of Risk Management, and also a professional ISO 31000 member. He was a founding member of Beehive's leadership team. It was the first regulated peer-to-peer lending platform to have successfully launched in the UAE and then across the region. So I'd like to hand over the control to our first panelist, to our risk management expert, who will talk about what exactly risk is, how do we identify it, how do we measure it, how do we assess it, and then how do we look at risk in a future world that is full of possibilities and threats. Over to you, Mitchell.
Thank you, Saeed. Thank you very much. Welcome all who are obviously viewing this webinar, wherever you are. Welcome to you, obviously, and also to the sort of fellow panelists. So as Saeed has said, great introduction there. This is going to be a very interactive section in terms of what we've seen in 2020. And just to give you a little bit of a summary in terms of the key areas that I'll be covering off in the short space of time. One is looking at what a risk actually is. How we manage those risks. What have we learned about the effects of risk management as a result of COVID during 2020, and how to sort of spot sort of new and emerging risks, and also as well, what have been the sort of key takeaways and learnings we've had, over the past few months in the grip of this. So they're basically going to be the sort of key areas that I'm going to sort of cover off. And, what I want to do is keep it on a level that we can all understand. I think when it comes to managing risk, it's about keeping things simple. I think the more simplistic you can keep it, the more effective it is. And, I'm a big advocate of the risk standards. As Syed has mentioned, I'm an ISO 31000 risk management professional. And I do refer to ISO 31000 in a lot of the sort of practices when it comes to the risk framework, processes, and sort of principles. So if we sort of start with what a risk is or what a threat is, again, if I use the sort of terminology we use in sort of ISO 31000, a risk is defined as the effect of uncertainty on business objectives. The effect can either be sort of positive or negative. I think the fundamental difference in terms of how historically risk has been positioned is that it's always been a negative thing. However, one of the things that we need to really sort of focus on is the upside of risk management. And if risk management is performed effectively, what you then have is the opportunity whereby you achieve your objectives, you seize those opportunities, you maximize resources, you enhance your governance, you minimize losses, and obviously you align your strategy to risk appetite statements. So, if risk management is done very effectively, for me personally, if we follow the guides, the principles, and the policies that are attached to this, then actually the management of a threat or a risk we need to see as more of a positive. Now, what we will have identified in 2020 is obviously, whilst COVID-19 has had an absolute disastrous or catastrophic effect on some of the economic opportunities, there have been some real opportunities which have sort of come out of this, and we'll come on to those sort of later. But I think in terms of, and we just position this, then for me, risk is, as I would define, the effect of uncertainty on business objectives. In terms of how we manage risk, there's a number of ways in which we do this. For me, it essentially follows a set of principles, framework and processing for sort of managing risk. And, you know, again, if I look to the principles that we apply when it comes to ISO 31000, it's all about sort of creating value and protection or resilience in terms of organizations. And, you know, 2020 has been a year whereby resilience has ultimately been tested to a lot of organizations, and some organizations have thrived and been agile and been able to adapt, and others obviously sort of suffered. But, you know, in terms of, you know, creating sort of value, the principles of risk management, they have to be integrated into your decision making. They have to be structured and they have to be comprehensive. Equally, they need to be customized to the organization, the entity, irrespective of sector. And also as well, you know, managing of threats needs to be very dynamic. One of the key tools we use for managing risks is a risk register. Now, it's critical that these risk registers remain dynamic, whereby we document new and emerging risks, and obviously as well we look at how we evaluate the nature of the risk, the control environments, and obviously the risk treatments. It's also about using the best information we have available. In an ideal world, you would have 100% of the data available to you, but that simply isn't the case. So we have to make the best use of information available to us. We also have to take into account the sort of human and cultural characteristics of each organization. So when I talk about the principles of risk management, they really define what we look at in that sort of way in which we sort of create value and resilience within the business. If I take the framework of how we look at sort of managing those threats, at the heart of it is leadership and commitments. You know, risk management has to be driven through the tone at the top. And again, it has to be integrated and implemented in a way in which it's then evaluated, and it's a constant cycle in which it's then improved. Again, from my own experience, if you don't have tone at the top, then you won't get the engagement across the key stakeholder groups you need in order to manage those threats very effectively. And I suppose finally, and this is probably the most important part in terms of what we do when it comes to managing those threats, is actually looking at the process for doing this. You know, critical to any form of risk management is communication and consultation. You know, what we have sort of seen over certainly the last 7 to 8 months is those organizations that have clear communication have clearly been successful during that sort of period. Those who haven't have clearly suffered as well. But I think it's the process of how we assess those risks which is really fundamental. And again, without going into, you know, the finite sort of details, it's a simple process of identifying that threat. You know, so identifying what the cause is, the risk, and then obviously the effects of the risk itself. It's then obviously analyzing this, and then obviously it's evaluating it. And then from out of those sort of 3 phases, it's then how you treat that risk. You know, is it a risk that we want to tolerate, for example? Is it a risk that we need to terminate? Is it one which we need to treat, i.e. reduce the level of the risk, or is it one that we need to transfer out, which we can do using different sort of risk mechanisms, which could include insurance, for example. And then I think the most important thing is about how we then sort of monitor and sort of review those risks. So, you know, fundamentally, that is the process that we undertake for managing threats and opportunities within or our organizations. In terms of what we have learned in terms of the last 7 to 8 months in terms of sort of COVID, and obviously how we look at identifying sort of new and emerging risks, I think it's fair to say there have been sort of 5 key areas which have been impacted. And I really want to talk to you now about what is believed to be the next sort of 18-month runway in terms of how these risks which have materialized are actually going to impact on all businesses. A recent study through the World Economic Forum had surveyed over 350 global leaders, and effectively they'd identified sort of 5 key areas where they see threats emerging over the next sort of 18 months. And I identified 31 sort of top risks during this sort of process. The key risks fell under the different categories of economic, social, geopolitical, technology, and environmental. I think what's quite interesting, at the beginning of the year, we were all talking very much certainly about climate change as being a huge threat to organisations, and certainly from my own perspective, from being from the UK, Brexit was obviously a huge topic as well, which again remains very, very in vogue in terms of where we are on this. However, out of those kind of 5 key pillars, as it were, sort of the effects on the economy are the ones that are going to see the biggest repercussions over the next sort of 18 months. And I think what's really interesting is, and we're starting to see this, is the prolonged effects of a global recession. Nearly 60% of business leaders, consider that to be the biggest threat that they and their businesses will encounter over the next sort of 18 months. As a direct consequence of that, then obviously that leads to high unemployment. Obviously, again, leads to sort of the weakening of major economies, as well as obviously industries sort of failing to recover. And with that, you'll see more things such as bankruptcies, more consolidation. You'll see a softening of emerging markets. I think one of the big threats that we have seen has been the prolonged effect to supply chains. And again, and I'll talk about how supply chains have been impacted. But I also think as well, there's been other consequences in the fact that, obviously there's been restriction on travel and sort of trade movements. Obviously as well, there's been other things such as the emergence of remote working, and also as well cyber attacks. So again, these have all obviously been things that we've had to sort of manage, and I'll talk more about sort of new and emerging risks a little bit sort of later. But the other thing as well we've seen is a sharp increase in sort of global inflation, and obviously as well, and this is really important here, the impact of people's mental health. I know in previous roles that I've been involved in, certainly when it comes to managing an environment where people are working remotely, have different circumstances in which they're now having to manage their daily work lives, getting that work-life balance has been particularly really important. And I think there's a greater emphasis now in terms of the impact this has had to people's mental health. So again, there are some very key human issues which have come out of this. Equally, we talk about significant and other waves coming out of this. Certainly in the UK, where I'm from, there's talks about second and third tiers of this sort of happening, and waves which is something we're having to manage. And there's ways in which sort of people are doing this. So there's been a number of different key areas or sort of key threats which have obviously sort of come out as a direct result of what we've seen over the last sort of, as I say, sort of 8 months. If I then sort of move on, and I think one of the things that we really wanted to perhaps sort of highlight is emerging risks. I think, one of the things that I like to talk about with my teams is about managing sort of risks and those threats looking forward rather than back. And I think historically risk management has been seen as a rear view function. And in order to adapt and identify those new and emerging risks, we as risk professionals need to look forward. And I think that's one of the key drivers that we need to do if we're going to manage these threats more effectively. I think there's been some key trends in terms of new and emerging risks which have come out of Covid-19. I think, first of all, the big one for me is fraud. I think we've seen, an increase in terms of levels of fraud. in terms of, people and certainly criminals looking to exploit the pandemic for this, and again, I think that's been sort of followed up with statistics from the sort of national crime agencies. Fraud for me is something that has certainly come into the fore this year as a direct result of COVID. I think the other thing as well, and aligned to that, is cyber attacks have also surged, and these are ranging from your typical sort of phishing attempts to sort of social engineering. I think we now understand that, cyber criminals are extremely sophisticated. And as a risk manager, one of the things that we have to do is to make sure that our IT, our cyber, our technology defenses are all well equipped against new and emerging risks, which can come in the form of cyber attacks, et cetera, et cetera. And then obviously leading on to that, a direct consequence is, as people are being asked to work remotely, then data and security is obviously a further consideration. Are we aware that people or employees are working from secure environments? Are they working from coffee shops? Do they have the threat of data being hacked? And again, the reputational challenges that sort of come with that. So data and security also has been a sort of key theme that I've seen over the last sort of 7 to 8 weeks, in addition to, and again, I think there's been some more challenges around AML, anti-money laundering. Again, it links in with sort of your cyber risks and obviously your data security. But I know that, criminals are looking to identify where there have been sort of weaknesses in controls, and where, sign-offs are required. Have there been any delays due to sort of technology challenges or availability of people? So again, AML has been another sort of key topic on the sort of risk register as a result of sort of COVID-19. And I think sort of moving on from that, I think the volatility has also led to sort of, market abuse and perhaps questionability on sort of market integrity. I know regulators have been looking at some of the temporary concessions that have been made, and equally, they've been around the areas around governance, around regulatory requirements. And I think, finally, and I sort of touched on this when it came and talked about sort of mental health, but I think it's very relevant, people and behavior, employees, it's now a balance of trust. We're having to ask people to do things differently, and suddenly expectations have moved and sort of shift. And, we as managers, we need to adapt to, the new efficiencies, which may be lost as a short-term measure, but equally, as we go forward, it's going to be the case that, businesses are going to look at their office environments, they're going to look at their infrastructure, and take a look at how productivity has been impacted over the last sort of 7 to 8 months. And equally, looking at their own sort of customer behavior. And I think finally, it's about sort of competition. There's been, as we know, an unexpected sort of outcome of opportunities which have arisen, which has promoted competition, and, this is not only relevant to, say, sort of the financial services market, but, if you look at payment technologies, if you look at the digital businesses which have thrived during this, those who provided essential goods and services through e-platforms, it's been a huge opportunity sort of for those guys. So, there have been opportunities where people have been able to thrive. And I think, one of the things that I would probably say, in order just to, I think, sort of summarize sort of where we are and some of the key takeaways from the last 7 to 8 months, is that, managing risks is kind of an act of imagination. And sometimes the human imagination is a poor tool for judging risk. People are really good at sort of responding to a crisis and what happens. But I think, what we need to be better at, and this is risk professionals, is being able to manage a crisis before it actually sort of happens, and obviously taking the actions to prevent those events from occurring. So, for me, that has to be a key consideration. Another lesson I think is around, as I've said, the enterprises don't truly understand the impact of the supply chains. I think also as well, we're in a situation whereby there's no hiding from COVID-19. What this has done is obviously it's changed the dynamic for many organizations across the globe,
right,
and highlighted the importance to be able to react, adapt, and sort of set up crisis management in order to kind of weather situations of uncertainty. And it's about creating an ecosystem so that if these things do occur, then we have a robust ecosystem that generates resilience. And finally, it's around that sort of embracing technology for faster responses. And I think that's one of the key areas that we'll continue to see as we go forward. But Saeed, I hope that's been
for me. Resilience for me, I think, is the bigger the word, the final takeaway. I mean, the organizations have to make that resilient attitude towards risk appetite, and have to define a framework in which where they can probably define an ecosystem where risk management finds predominant importance. And looking, and from your very insightful talk, I can take away that we have to be better prepared. We have bigger, better challenges coming through: Brexit, climate change, all the geopolitical risks coming through. And I think we have to be really proactive rather than looking into hindsight. So I mean, very, very beautifully illustrated as to how do we better equip ourselves in terms of how risk management needs to be managed here. I really thank you. I think we'll come back to you for a final conclusion in terms of risk management, in terms of what questions and people ask on risk management, and as such, can such risks be preempted, and how do we better mitigate and manage these risks? So I think one of the questions that has already popped up to me is to how better we could manage COVID, and how better can we see if at all any other catastrophe can make any other damages to our corporate environment. And we'll take that in our Q&A session later on. And moving on, I think we'll go on to the other angle of defense mechanism from a corporate environment. Now, corporate environment stands on 3 lines of defense systems, from a first line of control to a second line, and then to a third line of control, which also has its own predominant importance. Internal audit is something that is very, very key in providing that all-round protection that any organization should have. Though it looks from a very detective angle, it also can work proactively in getting organizations in a preventive environment as well, wherein they get a safety net where better risk can be managed, and how internal audit serves as a strategic partner to the defense mechanisms to any organizations. To speak more on the internal audit and the changing realities post-COVID era, and how better can internal auditors help the organizations to mitigate and identify these risks and safely work towards better and higher output of all organizations. We have with us Mr. Athar Iqbal, who is a professional internal audit and internal auditor, and who's had a body of experience behind him. He has diversified experience in internal audit, risk management, governance, fraud management. His education very I mean he's an SCCA, he's a CIA, he's done a CFE and CICA, UAE, and the educational credentials just go on and on. He was involved in training, mentoring of several employees. He's worked across different sectors. And I mean, it's better to hear it from the horse's mouth in terms of how internal audit can be the better third line of defense and strategic partner in protecting any organization's defense mechanism. I'll hand over the control back to Mr. Athar Iqbal, who would lead us in identifying internal audit as a key strategic partner in responding to this catastrophe of COVID and the times beyond that we are currently faced with.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Sayed. I really appreciate the introduction that you have done, and a lot of certification, even you have taken the name, even I don't remember as well. So, and I would like to appreciate Mr. Vishal as well, that he has done, wonderfully explained the risk management part as well. That's really, very effective actually nowadays, very much needed that, how to manage risk as well. So I will be just discussing about the risk management, and I will not go into detail about the risk management. I will just focused on the what the internal audit role about the risk management as well. So I will be more focused on the internal audit section as well, that how the companies and the individuals and during this time or maybe the changing realities in internal audit as well. So first of all, thank you very much everyone for joining us today. And my name is Athar Iqbal, as introduced by Mr. Sayed. So I will be just go through with some slides as well, so it can give you better idea with the small just like pick some sort of pictures as well, and then I will just like going for those introduction about the internal audit as well. That so if the guys they are coming from they came from some other background, so they can have the idea about the internal audit as well. So I will just share my screen, so then it will give you better idea as well. So it is something like that. So the topic actually it was decided by Mr. Sayed and the panelists, into the unknown. That's very because we are into new norms as well. So internal audit is very important topic nowadays. Risk management is also very important nowadays. The fraud, as mentioned by Mr. Mitchell, that is it's on the rise. The fraud incidents as well. So we will be discussing about something, the internal audit changing realities, how this is, I mean, the internal audit is be changed as well. Otherwise, if you're not changing yourself, then you will become irrelevant. Of course, this is something, my logo as well, that just like I'm discussing on different forums as well. You have to change accordingly. You have to change with the time. Otherwise, you will be going irrelevant with the, the organizations or maybe studies as well. So something actually, this has been discussed by Mr. Sayed. So this one this has been discussed by Mr. Introduction. There is no need for this introduction as well. I will just go straight forward on the introduction of the internal audit. Why I just want to give introduction, because I consider some people, they may came from some other the backgrounds as well, so they should know what is the internal audit basically. So then they can get a better idea what the internal audit they do. So basically, this is some sort of, in any organizations, this is some sort of independent, the guys activity is objective based or consulting activity that can add value in company operations as well. These guys are responsible for the, the risk management as discussed by Mr. Vishal, and then control environment as well, the governance process as well. Somehow they have the some specific role in the fraud management as well. So they're just looking for the internal audit. They are just looking for the effectiveness of the operations in the company. They are looking for the reliability of the operations, the financial management as well, and compliance laws and the regulations. So these are the basic, they are just like giving the partner. I consider them just like the strategic partner that we will be discussing on the other just like slide. What we do, why, and what we have to do. This is very important to understand that what we are doing right now and what we have to do. This is something, if the internal audit, they should, get the idea, then they can just add value in the company operations as well. First of all, if the guys, if the attendees, they are just like participants, if they from the internal audits backgrounds or maybe the risk management or fraud, they, I'm sure that they know that what the people think about us, because we are just like as mentioned by Mr. Sayed, three line of defense. Even the risk management, the internal audit is third line of defense as well. The people think about us as, these are just like, not now, these are just like people think about us as a police, because we are going and taking some sort of records from the people. We're just like inspecting those records as well. Our KPI is just like to get the some sort of mistakes from the operations as well, from other guys, mistakes. So some people think that this is a referee or something, they are coming and they are just like a doctor. They are coming and doing some sort of operations and then making better the the organization or something. So this is the perception right now in the organizations or maybe overall anywhere. If you're working, I have been working in several companies. I know there are a lot of in several cultural environment as well. The people think different perceptions about the internal audit. So the basic purpose to just show you this picture is just like what the people think about us. These are the, and what we have to do that. So if you will go just like on the next slide, you can see the objective. we should have the objective with the company, with the organization, with the people, with the stakeholders. We should have the strategic, stakeholders for the organization as well. From policeman, we have to move to strategic partner. The people should think that you guys, even the internal audit guys, they are coming and they will just become our partner, and then they give the value addition in our operations as well. That will help us to achieve the KPIs. If we will help them, the people, to achieve their own KPIs, they will be becoming the partner, the strategic partner for your own, if we are providing them the consulting activities in terms of risk management, how to manage risk as well, in terms of, fraud in incidents as well, in terms of controls, some consulting activities as well. So then, the reliability and the partnership become very strong, and the people, give lot of respect as well in terms of, the partnerships. So this should be the main objective as well for the internal audit section. Even before, after the COVID and pandemic, this is very important. You have to become a partner. You have to be very strong communication with the stakeholders, with the audit committee, with the management as well, regarding how to manage those unforeseen incidents as well. How you are improving those, sections, just like, yeah, how much you are ready for some sort of, unforeseen, just like the incidents as well. So this is very important for understand for the internal audit, that how they have to improve from policeman perception to they have to move forward on the strategic partner, that they should have the partnership objective as well. So this is something actually I just put this one because I just want to relate it to the COVID as well, that nowadays there a lot of changes has been done in terms of mostly is I mean, Mr. Bishal has been just like he discussed about a lot of changes, what is going on the risk management as well. So this is something, what's going on right now, how fast you are running. The world is changing drastically, and even including all those functions, even all the professions as well. If you are not running fast as the change is running, you will become irrelevant. This is for sure. There is no doubt about it. You have to upgrade your skills as well. You have to upgrade. You have to add value in the company operation, as far as just like how you can save. It's just like the sustainable advantage is just like you have to learn and you have to run faster than the change. This is the objective of behind this the picture as well. If you are not, if you're it's just like if the change comes up, just like COVID, take the example for the COVID came, everybody has to change. If they're not changed, and the world, just like the people, they changed it, and otherwise you will be changed, of course. So this is something very important. If something is coming, how you have to change, that's very important, to understand that how you can change is just like the you have to upgrade your skills. You have to go with the flow, what's going on right now in the market, what happened, how you have to adopt, how you are going to adopt the new technologies as soon as possible. There is one example actually, Mr. Syed, he has raised. That's a very good example. I have quoted as well that example. I will be just discussing about the Nokia, how they have gone, they have finished from the market. Why? Because they, in 2002 and 3, the guys, the Nokia was, the top of the, the market, and everywhere there was a Nokia. But now there's no Nokia because they haven't changed. They haven't foreseen the just like the future. They haven't discussed just like proper manage the risk management. They didn't see the risk, what's going on. Then that's why they have gone from the market. So this is changing, is change, I mean, just like is coming day by day. You have to go with the changes, otherwise it can become makes you irrelevant as well. This is another example I just want to give you. A lot of people, we know that if you we just like if you go back in maybe 2 decades only, you can see a lot of not so long just like TV, telephone, calculator, everything is there in one. You can see the how drastically the changing has been done. The world is changing. So if you will not change, then you will be changed. So that's why if you can see that nowadays only one mobile, you have everything. There's no need to go for anywhere. You can find news, you can find TV dramas, anything you can do that in calculators. So this is the the impact of change that can be done on your life as well, on your organization as well. So that's why it's very important to the foresee the future, what's going on. That's very important for the company. If you cannot foresee the future, you cannot manage the risk as well, you cannot add value as well. If you're going, just like on the next slide, I will show you what the perception right now for the internal audit section nowadays. They just go what has been done last year. They're going, taking files and just going for the another activity, and they're just like finishing the activity. So that's not the change that they're looking for. People they're looking for. This is the black pearl. You know, they did not get innovative fast as the other mobiles, as the other telecom operators, as the other, just like the Apple, the Samsung. They did not. They insisted their own operation. The operating system. They've gone. This mobile was, it was some sort of unique with a lot of people they're using, but they did not focus on the client. What the client they're looking for. For the internal audit, I just want to make sure the clients is the management, your stakeholders, your team, auditees. They just want to have some sort. You have to focus on those clients so you can give them the value addition in their lives as well. So that can give you insight in terms of respect and value addition as well. Otherwise, you will the if I have seen one the report that was seen that the accountants and the auditors, they are just like obsolete function is going to be maybe next 10, 20, 30 years. So you have to upgrade with the the technologies if you want to remain in the game. Otherwise this will be so anyways, this is something that I told you what the perception of internal audit right. I mean, nowadays they just go last year what has been done, and they are taking some sort of the activities and exercises, and they come up, okay, this was done last year. So there is no value addition. You haven't done anything for the company, for the organization. Eventually you will be relevant. So this is something you have to, the changing realities, that's I'm just like telling you the changing realities. So you should know that how you can just move forward and put the add value in terms of company operations as well. So there's another thing I just want to explain to here. As an internal audit function, as an internal auditor, you should not be the past focused. You should be the future focused. You should see, you should have the ability to see what's going on. Just like you can foresee the future as well. That can give you even though the confident as well, and then you can add value in the company operations. If you're not doing this activity, and you just like remain, you're putting yourself in the past, what's going on, you are going for the compliance only, then you cannot add value. There is no need for the reporting. Everyone can report, but what will happen, how you have just like add value in the company operations as well. So this is the thing that the companies, they're looking from the internal audit. Even in terms of COVID, there are a lot of challenges nowadays actually, and the internal auditor they are facing. They cannot go to the clients. They have to go, they have to shift. And if the internal audit function, if they are just like adopting the changes as soon as possible, so those guys just like putting the value addition in company operation. Otherwise, if there are a lot of other sections that we can discuss it here as well, but due to time constraint, I just want to focus on these one, that what the internal audit guys and the functions should look like. They should have the future focus. They should just foresee the future as well. They should add value in the company operation. They should not go only for the audit and do and just like finish the audit. No, if you are not changing as per the technology is changing, you will be changed. Of course, there is no doubt about it. So this is something, with the passage of time, you have to change accordingly actually. There's one slide that I put actually, it's related to Mr. Mitchell as well, what he has discussed. I just want to discuss about the internal audit role in terms of risk management. Risk management is huge, just like a vast field actually, what he has discussed. I mean, Mr. Mitchell, he has very good experience in this field as well. So I appreciate what he shared with us. So this is something, what as an internal auditor, I am an internal auditor, what I have the role in terms of company, there are some sort of, the defined, the SOPs as well for the internal audit. They cannot go for each and every activity because the independence can be, damaged. So you have to go for some sort of what we have to do. You have to only assess if any framework process or the SOPs are implemented by the company, you have to assess those, your effectiveness of those, the controls as well, effectiveness of those processes as well. You have to assess those SOPs, and you have to just like, we can just give some sort of yes or no. We can see it in terms of, the orange. You see, there are some activities that you have to, we can facilitate even for the companies to have to implement, framework to just like, but we cannot set a tone on the top. That is a management responsibility. You cannot implement the procedures. We cannot implement the action plans. We cannot decide that, as Mr. Mitchell discussed, that there is some sort of, the tolerance level for the companies. If we cannot decide the tolerance level for the company, for the activity, management, they are responsible to, decide those tolerance level. If you will take those tolerance level, you will decide, then you cannot add value. What the main objective for the internal audit is just like to add value in the company operations. So that's why if you're doing the activities as well, then you cannot go for the audits. So this is for sure. So these are the ingrained, these are the core responsibilities for the internal audit in terms of ERM, risk management, some sort of legitimate internal audit roles and the safeguard as well. So roles that internal audit should not take it, that the everyone should take care about this one. You should not take accountability for the risk management process as well. This is not my job. My job is to just see the effectiveness of the frameworks, what has been implemented, and you have to see the manage how the companies, organization, they are managing. So my responsibility is to see how they are managing, whether they are managing properly, is up and down, just like, if the risk, there are some sort of, the risk rating as well, the risk heat map from 1 to 25. Suppose if some risk is higher level, you have to manage. If the management is there saying that you have to keep it at the medium level, so you have to implement some, this is the management responsibility to implement, but our responsibility is to see those, the effectiveness of those implementation as well. So this is the value addition that internal audit in terms of risk management they are putting. So in nowadays, the actually due to COVID, the challenges and the, the is just like the risk management become very hot topic everywhere. The people, they are asking for the risk management because, mostly there are a lot of failure have been, we have seen the late lot of failure that the risk management, the function, they were not ready about the COVID, maybe the disaster recovery plan, maybe, the business continuity, they were not ready for those actually. Now actually this become very hot, the topic as well, maybe the profession and including internal audit as well. The people, they think that, this is something that you have to more focused on the company, or company wise as well, section wise as well. The people, they should do that. So this is something, I just want to escalate in terms of COVID as well, that this is nowadays major responsibility for the internal audit function is to focus on those, how they are managing the risk as well. The organizations, they have to support, they have to, get some sort of, the in terms of, discuss with the how the companies, they are managing those, some sort of risk management frameworks as well. With, as I have worked in it a lot, so there was a ERM committee, ERM team. Those guys were managing those risks as well with the stakeholders. As an internal audit, my responsibility was to see and discuss with the ERM committee and ERM team that how they are managing. So see the effectiveness. So the people, they will ask from the internal audit, whether you have done the audit for the ERM, whether they are doing effectively those managing risk management. So this is very important topic for the internal audit. They have to be more focused on this, how they can add value in terms of, risk management. Fraud management we are not discussing, but even though as an internal audit, you have to be very careful about the fraud, because nowadays in terms of COVID, the incidents are on the high rise. They're on the sky rise, we can say. There are a lot of incidents ongoing with the NGOs, with the, lot of, the charities as well, and the companies as well, because 90% of the companies, they are online, everything is online. So everything, the fraud incident, as I agree with Mr. Mitchell, that it's on the sky rise. The people, they are just like to be more focused as internal audit, because our role as internal audit is give some sort of, the confidence to the companies, the organization, that whatever is operations ongoing, they are just like taking care. Controls are very, the effective. So this is something, you have to be very taking care in terms of risk management. So last slides, I will not take more than only 2 minutes more than that. So best practices to add value. This is, again, very important to understand for the internal audit function right now in this COVID time. This is very important to understand, and I must say that, because if you will not put the value-added culture now in this time, then the management, even though they are going for the cost cutting or whatever, if you're not putting any value addition in the company operation or the culture or anything, if you haven't created those culture, if you haven't built the relationship with the company or with management as well, so then you will be, you will be just like the people will think, it's irrelevancy will be, will come into picture that, these guys, they're not putting anything in terms of. So these are the best practices, value adding culture. You have to create those value added culture as well in the company operation and management. They should trust you. They should give you a lot of other, the assignments that how we can improve these operations as well. So nowadays, as an internal audit, we believe on the independence, of course, but nowadays in this, difficult time as well, we believe that the partnership with the organization, with the management, with the key stakeholder is more than independence. Even though we should take care about the independence as well, but partnership to add value, that will be, huge. It will impact a huge in terms of, the value addition in the company operations as well. Of course, this is another thing, internal control trainer, coach, and our risk control champions as well. So these guys, what they do, just like I have done in many companies, for giving awareness. I spread, the knowledge about the internal control, how you have to, make more effective controls, just like coaching in terms of, risk management as well, that how you have to manage risk, what is the risk. 90%, believe me, the guys from the, the other backgrounds, they don't know what is the risk. They only consider risk is something, even though risk is a opportunity and, the danger as well. Maybe Mr. Vishal, you can agree with me. This is, it's including the danger and the opportunity as well. Anyone can take the opportunity from those risks if you are managing properly. You can take the advantage from those risks as well. So look for the opportunities to improve for the business. This is also best practices. If you are just like, you're not only for the internal audit, you are just like the guys who are looking for overall company operations. So you can have better idea about how we can improve the businesses as well. So this is something, the basic, I just want to make it in simple words, so that the people should understand, even the guys from the internal audit background, they should know how they can just put the add value in terms of this one. So this was the something that my actually presentation, and maybe my words for the companies as well. So I just want to say in this one, this is something, if you can, this relates to internal audit function actually. You have to measure. If you cannot measure, you will not understand that what's internal audit, department, what the company operations as well. If you do not understand, then you cannot control it, of course. And if you cannot control, just like a car, if you cannot control, you cannot improve the driving as well. First, you have to make control on the, the company operations, what's going on, understand the, the business acumen as well. So this is something, very important nowadays, that mostly people, they, they are just like in terms of difficult time, in terms of COVID as well. So the takeaways, what I will consider here as well in 2 minutes, you have to change with the change. The number one, that's very important. It's in any field. You have to change with the change. Otherwise, the change will change you. This is number one and the top one that I consider. Mostly people have seen that they haven't changed as for the, even the companies. If you can see, the top 500 companies in the world, they are just like they have changed from last 50 years. If you can see them. So those actually, the takeaways is just like, you have to create a culture of, the value addition with the management. You have to create a culture. You have to create trust with the management as well. In this time, you can improve those operations as well. So this is something, I just want to stress on those, the points as well. And I think that's fine. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the, the step that you have taken, Mr. Syed, for the awareness for the people as well. And thank you so much for that. Yeah.
I think fabulously concluded there. And when you said you got to change with the change, else the change will change you. If we can just change that change statement that you made, I can change it. Change will change you. Otherwise, change will eliminate you. I mean, I think eliminate is the driving factor there. It would not really change, it would just totally exterminate you. So it was fabulous. I think very well presented. And just on a concluding part, although I'm also part of the internal audit risk management, I think just to sum up, I think any strategic objective of an organization has to be driven by four very important factors. That is very paramount in defending and also contributing to growth. Any strategic objective of any organization has to be business focused, has to be process oriented, controls based, and finally, it has to be measurement driven. I mean, these four things all engulfed together can protect any organization and can contribute to its significant growth. So thank you, Mr. Athar. Thank you. It was very, very nice. I mean, the way you presented it, and it was very enlightening for all of us and all the attendees as well. Moving from a defense mechanism zone into listening from what the business should outright do to protect its environment. We have with us one of a corporate training crew who's a market leader in training CXOs, in providing strategical responses to these people who actually matter. It's a very significant and very challenging profile that this person comes from, because CEOs, CFOs, CXOs, CIOs, you name any CIOs, they come from great educational and practical experiences. But then guiding them towards success mantra can be a little difficult, because these people come up with their own credentials to boast of. However, maneuvering them and probably train them is something which is very challenging, and this person has gotten the art of it. He's also my trainer in one of our courses that we had done during a chartered accountancy times, and has been recently has compiled a book on the coronavirus and very aptly titled "No Reference Point." And if you look back, there was no reference point for this pandemic, and to come up with the book as quickly and as in pertinent time that he has, and the way that he manages his work is very outstanding. So I'd like to invite JVC Sriram now to enlighten us in terms of how the management, how corporates, how any other individual in a professional capacity should look into this pandemic from a different lens. I mean, all of us look into it from a risky perspective. But does a pandemic like this throw out opportunities? Does a pandemic like this look into the way of how better can we look into our managing a professional work in a corporate environment? So this speaker of that I'm going to invite next, as I said, is a corporate guru. He's a keynote speaker in many of the events. He's a change management expert, and also deals in a lot of VUCA world. He's trained tens of thousands of CXOs, and he's developed, path-breaking training models. And I'd like to invite him and you will be a judge of yourself, and you will listen to him. He's a very engaging person. So I'll hand over the control to Sriram now, who will take over and probably enlighten us with his message. Sriram?
Thank you, Iqbal. Good evening or good morning, good afternoon to each one of you. Great, Mitchell, to hear you, and great, Iqbal, to hear from the perspective of the risk and the audit. I'm not coming with the risk or the audit perspective. I'm going to put it across straight away that I would be stressing more in terms of what kind of response which companies add, corporates and individuals add. And I think Mitchell made a very, very important point. Human imagination and human brain has been tuned and fine-tuned to respond, but to predict is something which is very difficult. In fact, that's what I think Mitchell has not talked about. So I'm going to take up a few cases, because I for one never thought that this particular thing would become such a, what do you call a VUCA moment, a mega VUCA moment. Top of the moment of VUCA. VUCA has been there ever since 1987, if I'm right, with the Cold War coming to an end. They came out of the VUCA world, volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And none of us, trust me, none of us ever thought at the start of the year, even when the Chinese whispers started going around that something of this kind is happening, that we're going to see something of this kind. But what has been witnessed and what we are witnessing is undoubtedly unprecedented. And that's the reason why I called it as no reference point. And we need to look at how organizations and individuals responded. Because the biggest key lesson is in times of these kinds, the pandemonium, which is going to come. It's not, let's not try to be, I'm not trying to be pessimistic here. Don't call me pessimistic, but I'm not going to be optimistic here. The world has seen a lot of calamities, but none of them got the attention which COVID-19 had got. There is always risk. There was always uncertainty. There was always volatility. But it was brushed aside. Whether it was economic or it was violent, terrorism, whatever way you call. It was never taken at such a level by all the countries and the heads of countries, and when the heads of countries got affected. When a Trump or a Boris Johnson gets affected, now it demands a different attention altogether. So what this is thought is, the biggest thing is, in these times of pandemonium, I'm not written about the pandemic because I'm not a biologist, I'm not a chemist, I'm not a doctor. So I'm not written from a pandemic perspective. I've come from a pandemonium perspective. This pandemic has created a pandemonium, a business pandemonium, which is true. And these kind of pandemoniums are going to happen. The first lesson is, in these times of pandemonium, you can't be optimistic, my dear friend. You got to prepare yourself for the worst. I'll give you an example. India had hardly seen, 3 or 4 cases by February 18th, 2020. Here is a chain of hospitals in the eastern part of India, which comes out of guidelines. In fact, I covered in my book also. They come out with guidelines. By 22nd of February, they have their own set of, they changed a lot of things, right from the air conditioning system to that of touchless wash basins and sinks, to that of, temperatures being checked right before WHO declared it as a pandemic. Now, some of the other hospitals actually said, why are you trying to do something which you don't even know whether COVID is going to come to India or not? But these guys had their investors in Hong Kong. And they got the message loud and clear that, look, this is not going to be something localized. And a country like India, which has a huge population, at some stage you're going to get affected, might as well get prepared. The first hospital. And what did happen? 2 or 3 things happened. These are the first hospitals who were able to, private hospitals, to treat COVID patients. Wasn't that an opportunity? Number 2, this was the only hospital where not a single healthcare worker or a doctor has died due to COVID-19, even after treating a few thousands of patients. Now, what does it show? It shows that in times of pandemonium, even if it is going to be a little bit, you're going to have critical thinking. You're going to have swift thinking process. Your response to the change is happening. And change is changeless. And that which does not change does not grow. And that which does not grow dies. And Alfred Lord Tennyson wrote long time ago that the old order changeth yielding place to new, and God fulfills himself in many ways, lest one good custom should corrupt the world. So change is happening. And I agree with what Mr. Iqbal spoke, that companies like Nokia, which are covered in the book, also that failed to recognize the change was coming. As Nokia is just an example. And likewise, we had so many companies. Market leaders have been swept around. So what is number one? Number one is you don't be on the very, very optimistic side, saying that nothing is going to happen. And even today, people who are getting COVID-19 or getting infection is because they're going out, mixing up with people, And that few moments where they remove the mask and they forget about social distancing, and that's when they get infected. It is better to be cautious than to be optimistic in times of pandemonium. Number two, make the trend your friend. What is the trend now? Trend is now change. In an economy where most of the companies have not been doing well, how would you look at a company which grew by 29% in April, May, June quarter of 2020? And I had an opportunity. In fact, they happened to be associated with me. And by that, sometime in the first week of May itself, I realized that this company is doing well. I said, let me have an interview with the head of this organization. And they're a $7 billion organization located in 130 countries. And again, what did these guys do? These guys, on the day when the Janata curfew in India, we had something called the Janata curfew, which was the entire nation went on a curfew on March 22nd, on Sunday. March 23rd, these guys met and said, hey, we are essentials. We are a company which are into agrochemicals. So let us do everything possible to ensure that not a single day the factory will be closed. And they may be a company which is doing into essentials, but the suppliers were not into essentials. The suppliers were all, did not even know that they're part of a supply chain where they're going to supply to a company which is going to be manufacturing essential items. But and they did amazingly well. And the most important thing which has come as far as this pandemic is concerned, because crisis, this virus coming from China has proved to be truly socialistic in nature. So I have gone to find out various terms in Chinese and Mandarin only. In Mandarin language, crisis has got two meanings. One is danger, another is opportunity. This COVID-19 is also an opportunity. I use this as an opportunity to write my first book. I don't want to watch. That's a personal thing I'm talking about. An organization. So even when I was talking with the senior director of Walmart, he was saying, Sriram, do you think a company of Walmart size, normally what would take 8 months for a decision to be taken and executed? Can you imagine something happening in 6 days? And it came in news items. I think many of you must have read it. People who were aged, who were at risk, and who could not come to do shopping, they said, we will have a concierge services done. And an app was developed. In 6 flat days, a company like Walmart and Sam's Club, in 6 flat days, and decisions were taken at every level. They didn't even, companies which succeeded or companies which add a level of empowerment already embedded into their DNA. And companies which did not have empowerment in their DNA were the ones who suffered. For everything, if I have to go to the board of directors, now things are not going to work. Yes, decisions can go wrong. In fact, one of the other big things which happened was some of the organizations were willing to listen to the bad news which was being conveyed from the lower level. Because many CEOs and CFOs would like to have people surrounding them who would be singing music. Hey, we are doing great, amazing, there is no risk, we are all in the right path. No, companies were willing, the companies which were winning, the CEO said, bad news, tell me, relay to me, involve. Let's not try to sweep it under the carpet. And this guy says, in Walmart, they say, in 6 flat days, we developed an app. We circumvented all the things that we said, okay, this is the developer, we are going ahead with this is the designer, we are getting it done. We did the beta testing and we worked 24/7. 4 different teams were formed, and 6 days flat, the app was developed. And in 16 minutes in USA, a senior citizen can log into the app, come with the car, stand in the parking, doesn't have to move around. In 16 minutes flat, it would be delivered and whatever he wanted, and the credit card payment would happen. And result, what happened? When retailers were filing bankruptcy in USA, let me be right, Walmart grew by what? I think, if I'm right, because I'm having the book in hand, Walmart grew by 8%. and Sam's Club growth was by 16%. Opportunity. So I found the common element was the 7 elements. I call it the 7 elements of leadership in pandemonium times. The first thing is encourage. Even now, because we are not into post-COVID situation. Encourage people to communicate. I think already Mitchell was talking about it, communication being the most important tool. And allow people to communicate the bad news. It's okay. Instead of market giving you a bad news, let the insider come and tell you this will not work. If you have to have a program called Dial Your CEO, let them reach the top if a decision has to be taken. Encourage. Engage with people. Engage with every stakeholder. It could be, even UPL is the company which I'm talking about, which grew by 29% at the same time. They decided that they engage with the government. They had people who would call up the Union Health Minister's office, Home Minister's office, and say, this is a guy who's an MSME stuck in this part, this district, and he is a supplier of us. Being a supplier of us, who are an essential commodity manufacturer, if he doesn't supply, we can't manufacture, so give us permission. Engagement, all levels of engagement. And can you imagine the kind of engagements we have seen in some of the countries with the farmers? Many of the countries do not have, did not have a food crisis, did not happen in spite of lockdowns. Food was available. How digitization? Can you think of a farmer meetings happening over Microsoft Teams and Zoom? Because today mobile has circled. I can talk for India. I can talk for even Kenya. Because during the lockdown period, unfortunately, I didn't travel to, I came back from Kenya on the day of lockdown. Can you imagine somewhere in the remote parts of Uttar Pradesh, in northern India, where farmers are getting engaged with a mobile phone on their hand, and somebody sitting in Hyderabad, having a Zoom call or a Microsoft Teams call with them, an engagement, and what level of engagement we are talking about. We're not talking about a very ordinary level of engagement. So number 2 is engagement. Number 3, empathize. I think work from home. And I'm sure many of you would agree with me that, I think there is no dividing line between the work life and personal life anymore. 24/7 we have become. In fact, I've been asked in my college professors called me and said, can you please address our staff, including our head of the departments and management? I asked, what happened? Why do you want me to address? They said, earlier we used to go to the college by 8 o'clock and come back by 4 o'clock. Today, 6 o'clock till 12 of the midnight, this meeting, that meeting, any kind of meeting, they're calling up. And we live in a 3-bedroom apartment. And children have to do studies online. My husband has to work from online and I have to work from online. What's that empathy? And another side I saw, there was an organization where a CEO had to reach out to other people because he had to ask his employees to go because his business was down completely. He was in a travel agency. And you all know what happened to travel agency. It's a business which may not even get up and run in the next few months or years it may take. And this guy called up and said, I have a very sincere employee and I'm unable to, give him salary. Can you absorb him in your company? Now, this is the level of empathy I'm talking about. Amazing empathy level. Next is people level. People have lost hope. Energy is required. We need leaders who can talk with energy, communicate with energy, who can give hope. Because even if somebody has lost a job, I saw some chats, saying people talking about jobs lost and all. Yes, there would be job losses. There would be brands which will change hands, hotels across the world. Change of ownership is going to happen. Novotel, Sofitel, all these will remain, but the ownership will change. And as a result of which, there will be a lot of uncertainty and a lot of communication 360 degrees with energy and hope is another need of the hour. Going into the unknown, this is required. Next, empower people to take decision. In fact, this is one thing I keep talking to all the leaders, saying that do not think you are the best decision maker. There are a lot of people. In fact, we also found one more thing. People who have handled crisis in their personal life, they have been able to handle this pandemonium in a better manner. And it is not seniority. It is not the hierarchy which determined the leadership position. It is about the ability to take the tough decision. Jack Welch used to always say, edge of the decision. Yes or no, the tough yes or the tough no. It's nowhere. I have to take a call. This way or that way. And there's a huge risk involved. And you didn't have time, it was fire. You can't call for a steering committee, managing committee, and then recommendation and going up and down. You can't have this bureaucratic governmental things. You got to take a decision. And decisions can go wrong. I think this is where the leadership also needs to understand that, and they've understood that all decisions will not be right. So empower people and then equip them. Because this is another area where I found a lot of companies have had a challenge. While they said, okay, you can take a decision, but have you equipped them with the right tool? Have you given them the whatever is required? That's required. In fact, Medical Hospital said, our PPE costs $10. But what is available in the market is available for probably $3 or $4. But a $3 or $4 PPE might not be working properly for 12 hours. And in those few moments when the doctor is treating a COVID patient, and if the PPE, toes off, there is a chance of infection. And we didn't want to have that. And he said, I can replace anything, but I can't replace doctors. And if there's a cost involved to it, I'm ready to pay that cost. Equip. And finally, execute to excellence. Too much of analysis leads to paralysis. Execution is the need of the hour. Get into the execution mode, action mode. Your actions may produce the right results, may not produce the right results, may produce the wrong results. Take a call, introspect. Corrective actions can be taken. But do not be afraid to take decisions. Take decisions. Get into action. And if we do these, I can see an opportunity coming out of COVID to correct a lot of wrongs. Because however, the past system, however good it was, there was also faults which were involved in it. That's why Lord Tennyson says, old order changeth, yielding place to new. Let one good custom should corrupt the world. What was a good custom yesterday need not be a good custom tomorrow. And COVID has given a wonderful opportunity. Don't look at it from a negative perspective. Because we are now almost out of it. Vaccination is going to come and we will get out of it. Hope is required. Decide, execute, jump into action. And that's the way, because we all have to live in hope. This virus is not going to go out anytime soon. It will come back. There is a second wave and all those stuff has happened. What we can do is, within these constraints, let me make the best of the worst and steer our life towards safety and growth and look for opportunities. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And I would be more than glad to answer as we move along. I hope I was able to manage the time correctly for you, Vikar.
Thank you so much, Sriram. I mean, it was very, very interesting, very, very enlightening. I mean, some of the key takeaways of the 7 E's was really very wonderfully concluded. I think lots of things to take away from your talk. I think more than the challenge, the opportunity looks very promising, and you really highlighted what should be the response of corporates and of individuals in this time of pandemonium. Moving on, I think the crux of most of the talk of Sriram and the other panelists that we have, Athar and Mitchell, I think is the growth of IT and digitization and automation. And as Sriram was pointing out, that Walmart had to come up with a digital solution, with a digital app, doing away with all the hierarchies and bureaucracies and just trying to have a market outreach in 6 flat days. And that is very phenomenal from from a business point of view, if someone can execute that, and that throws in a lot of questions in terms of what is the kind of automation, what is the kind of IT skills, and what is the kind of technology you're moving ahead with. And because of this, and the other risks associated with IT does arise, and from a source of IIA, it's very safe to say that, and Mitchell also was pointing out, cybersecurity is at its peak. And it's nowhere going away, in the coming months. It's going to hit every organization. And some of the famous quotes by CIOs in a conference in the recent past said that there are two types of organizations: either they've been hacked or they will be hacked in the near future. So it was very simple that cybersecurity, data protection, and IT as such has gone into a zone where we cannot really avoid getting into a technological zone. And that's where our last panelist for the event comes from. He is a data protection, IT, and a digitization evangelist, a preacher of getting things done, but in the manner in which technology can be best utilized. He's served as a global leader in a lot of multinational companies, and he's brought in different digital products, blending innovations and to cater to far-reaching consumers across the globe, across America, Europe, and the Indian subcontinent. He has plenty of experiences in IT infrastructure management, and he's even driven several turnkey projects and transformations, embedding automation, operational excellence, and customer satisfaction. He's also a Six Sigma expert, and while he would not be talking about cybersecurity, he would be talking about how, from a business IT point of view, are we going to protect ourselves, and what's going to be the future in terms of how IT is going to be rolled out in the times to come. So with that, I'm going to hand over the control to Aleem, who is going to highlight the role of IT in the coming world. Aleem, take it away.
Thank you, Athar. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to everybody. Can you please confirm if you can actually see my screen? I've got a presentation that I would like to share.
Perfect. Visible.
Okay. All right. So, we all spoke about COVID and how COVID has impacted, variety of our, variety different ways, how our different lives have been impacted, different environments, different industries. And IT, as the other panelists have already spoken about, has been impacted in a big way. And, in my mind, in my personal view, there have been two big areas that has, in an IT world that has impacted. First, we all now have a new office, like many of the panelists have already mentioned, right? And as a matter of fact, I think a lot of organizations literally had to shift the entire workforce overnight and equip them to work digitally remotely. And that meant that they have to enable the entire workforce to be able to do exactly everything that they could do when they were in office, now remotely. Also, they had to ensure that they equip their employees with all the resources, because every meeting, whether it was a client-facing meeting or a customer meeting or internal meeting, everything went virtual. Even the conversations that were like a coffee cooler, coffee machine, or water cooler conversation, even those conversations are now chat or meetings. And more importantly, everybody is remote. So how do the organizations be able to equip their workforce, continue to operate, without adopting digital transformation, right? That was the big challenge that people had to adopt, right? In the past, digital transformation or adopting to these collaboration platforms and etc. were like an edge, right? Or a differentiator. But now in the COVID times, this became an essential, a survival need for the organizations. This, was one of the biggest changes, right? In terms of how like Sriram mentioned, right? Walmart had to come up with a new app, and we have seen a lot of other startups right now that are working in creating newer digital platforms. While all of that is happening, right, we also have to understand that this rate of change, this accelerated rate of adoption of digital transformation, adopting of collaboration platforms, also comes with the risk, also comes with the security threat, and we have to be very cognizant from an IT standpoint in terms of how we adopt and start picking up these solutions. I mean, of course, we're having this platform on Zoom, but it was quite well known that when this pandemic really started, Zoom's usage, I think changed, increased by, threefold, right? Or 3 or 4-fold. But also it led to a lot of security issues, and which of course Zoom has addressed. But that's what I'm talking about, right? As we expand, as we adopt, as we grow on the digital transformation, the risks are always going to be there. And of course, this is not new, right? The risks were always there. The risk will continue to be there. And the risk is also present right now. But given a scenario like this, an environment like this, there is a sharp increase in how the threat actors, Mitchell talked about it, Sriram talked about it, even, Mr. Iqbal, everyone spoke about the cybersecurity risks that are there and how the threat actors leverage or use this opportunity where there is an anxiety, there is fear, right? People are anxious about what's going to happen and use that as a platform for them to exploit and make their headway into their malicious intents. To further, expand the IT challenge for the future, right? Of course, we all are remote, but as many organizations are taking surveys and there are, organizations that are doing external surveys or internal surveys, we see that the trend in a post-COVID era is that there will always be people who are still preferring to continue to work from home. There is a trend that people don't want to actually come back to an office because they have now seen the productivity. Of course, there is, like Sriram, you mentioned, that there's hardly a difference between the work life and the personal life. But also, people have also seen a productivity increase in what they could do when they are working at home. They see they don't have to travel those 1-2 hours in a traffic and to get to the work. And that is kind of a trend that we see, that even in a post-COVID era, we might have employees who'd actually prefer to work from home. What it means for an IT, a head of IT or an IT environment, is that in the future, or actually we are right now in this future, where we have a new concept, is called the hybrid workplace. And what is going to be important is how do we protect this hybrid workplace? Why is this hybrid workplace so different, right? I mean, of course, organizations have spent time and effort and resources in trying to protect their environments in their IT offices and etc. But then how does this change with the hybrid workplace? And this is what probably I'll spend some time. And to really tell you the difference, right, I would like to just talk about how in a traditional world, right, in a pre-COVID world, what the cybersecurity specialist talked about is the layered protection, the layered security levels, right? What are the different elements in an organization that you would have to protect from an IT or a cybersecurity standpoint? So the first, of course, is the data. Mitchell talked about it. Data is the most important. Data privacy, ensuring that your data is, stays, protected. So at the core, that is what we need to protect. The next is about the applications or the servers, through which on which, the application resides or the data resides or is accessed through. You need to ensure that you have the right controls on your applications. You have to have right hygiene on your servers. You need to protect that as well. Then, of course, comes the endpoints, right, through which you actually access these applications, therefore the data, and you work and you deliver to your customers. All of that, the endpoints, the assets, they have to be protected. And today in the traditional environment, you would have a defender, you would have antivirus solutions on your laptops that protects. Is that sufficient right now? That's what we look at in the next slides. Then it's about people. People who are actually using it, and people are one of the most important elements that you will have to ensure are managed and ensure that the environment stays secure. Further on, all of this in the traditional setup was protected because we used to work in the office. Our laptops are connected to the corporate network. Our applications are behind the corporate network, and all of that, right, is protected through the firewalls, before the internet, in front of the internet. And if at all there was a threat actor who wanted to penetrate and infiltrate and try to get access to the database, to the servers, to the information, it was all protected, by the firewalls or the different levels of controls you would have. And of course, even though you have all this protection, right, of the network and the firewall and all the protection that you put in your corporate network, we always need to have a backup and a remediation where you ensure that your data is backed up and is in a place that can be recovered. So this is in a way the overall layered, security approach that traditionally every organization would try to imbibe and implement in their respective organizations. But what has changed right now is the threat actors are focused very heavily right now on the users and the endpoints. So how does that look like? The entire layered protection kind of flips out, where the users and the endpoints are more vulnerable, are more exposed because of the remote work, right? And you still have your servers and your data and everything protected because they're still hosted in your data center and etc. But having an opportunity more, having a more opportunity to exploit the users and the devices, there is lesser protection right now than it was in the future. So let's look at some different things in terms of what an organization should do in order to focus and help further improve their cybersecurity protection. Email has always been the protection. Mitchell talked about the phishing attacks and how that is a big risk. Email has always been the most vulnerable, most exploited means of threat, and it continues to be that. And organizations now have no choice but to adopt solutions like Office ATP or phishing protection solutions that they cannot live without. And that is one big area that you need to an organization has to focus on. The challenge, again, the panelists spoke about, Mitchell, Sriram, and Mr. Iqbal also spoke about, is being remote. How does this impact IT? People might be working from their home offices, right, which will not be protected from a Wi-Fi standpoint. They could actually be working from a coffee shop. They could be using a public network, right? How protected is that? And to enable that we ensure that the connection that employees now have to their resources, to the corporate resources, is protected. It is essential that organizations, if they do not have VPN, they need to ensure they do have VPN solutions implemented. They need to focus on that. Further on the PC itself, right? When you access your web, you need to ensure that you have basic DNS level protection, because that's the first line of defense. You need to know what you need to block, and you need to prevent what is already known as malicious. So it's important that you put controls on your web access as well. And lastly, it's the endpoint itself. Because we all are remote right now, there is a good possibility that employees could actually be using their personal assets for work use, or they could also be using their work laptop for personal use. And that's where it's very important that the protection is there on the endpoint itself. And that is actually the biggest change that we have seen because of the COVID situation. From a protection in the past, in the traditional setup, it was more about trying to protect the network, trying to protect through a firewall, through a lot of controls. But now the focus is on the endpoint, the actual device that is used by people to access the network resources. So if we do all of this, we put in the Office 365 or phishing protection, we ensure we have VPN, we have DNS protection, we have endpoint protection, not just through a Windows Defender, but advanced tools, like EDR tools. We kind of protect, the asset, let's say. But then there is one other aspect. It's a user. That user needs to be educated. I'd seen a meme where you'd see a soldier, from a traditional environment, in a full armor, a full body armor. A soldier fully protected except for the eyes for him to see, and there is an arrow that shoots right into the eye. Right. So that's the analogy that I would like to say about we could have all the controls, right? But if we have a user who does not, has done something involuntary or voluntary incorrectly, it can, just have a very high impact to the overall organization. And in order to guide the user, we need to have the right policies, we need to have right procedures and right controls from an organization standpoint. And these are some very basic things that have changed because of COVID. But as a whole, as IT organizations, what is important is we all have to start looking at the cybersecurity and security strategy differently. We also have to look at access management. It's very important, again, from a data privacy, from a data governance, as well, in terms of who has access to what systems. It is about the joiners and leavers, right? How much control do we have on the joiners and leavers in terms of access reviews? Do we have the right person, the right access? Does somebody else who does not need the access have access to something that they shouldn't? We need to ensure that we have that controls. Again, the panelists already spoke about the importance of assessing, reflecting inside, doing audits, internal audits, doing risk assessments, having the risk register to ensure that you are looking at and identifying what is available internally into an organization and identify the risks that have to be mitigated. And of course, the whole data privacy thing as well. So in short, in summary, the future is going to be hybrid workplace. The future is digitization, adoption of digital technologies. It's no longer a choice. It's no longer an edge. It's a necessity. There are a bunch of cybersecurity solutions and areas that have to be focused very specifically on. And as a whole, I think if an organization has to relook, and every organization has to relook necessarily right now, it will also require them to relook at their cybersecurity expense. And we see that this expense is only going to increase in the future. So I try to cover a lot of topics. If there is any area that you would like me to expand and elaborate more, I will be very happy to take questions when we get to that. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lima. It was totally insightful, and some of the points that you mentioned are very, very apt and appropriate in this times that we are moving fast and towards a digital world, and it's very important to necessarily maintain composure and have the necessary controls. And as you rightly said, some of the corporate governance issues need to be really taken seriously. And although we are moving fast towards an IT environment, it's just the controls that need to be really in effectiveness that protects every organization from downfall. I think we'll open up the floor now for some Q&A, and we have a few questions coming through. Some of the questions that have been specifically asked for some of the panelists, and I'll just read through them and the panelists can elaborate more on that. The first question is by Mohammed Rizwan, and he says, what do you mean by change or update for a professional whose skills are already high and has enough experience and is more than enough compared to the market demand, but still these people are suffering with unemployment factor of market? And he wants Mr. Iqbal to answer that question. So I'll let Mr. Athar Iqbal answer that question. And if anyone wants to add in post that, most of them welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sayed. And thank you very much, Mr. Zwan, for the question. Actually, this is a wonderful question. Why? Because what we discussed actually relating to internal audit, the changing realities, that was overall perspective of internal audit itself. It's called, internal audit department, internal audit activity. In terms of, the jobs, why I'm saying that you have to be skillful with the passage of time as the technologies are coming, just like in terms of audit, if you're from audit background, you know that, analytics, that there are a lot of, the technologies are coming in internal audit as well. If you're not upgraded with your, the technologies, then what I mean is just like you will be irrelevant, like, you will not get ready for the opportunity. If suppose you're not getting the job, and then still if you're not ready and you're not getting ready yourself for the job, for the technologies and upgrading yourself, then you will not be, the what I can say, just like, you will not be relevant for the further opportunities as well, because technologies has been changed. So my, concern, my, the point was just like you have to upskill yourself in terms that whenever the opportunity comes, you have to grab it. This is the point that I just want to tell you, that, if you're not ready for the opportunity comes and goes. And then, there are a lot of other people that they're ready for the opportunity, they will take it. That is my, the point it was that I want to raise it, that, you should be ready for those opportunities. It's not a matter of only for the job you're getting maybe today, or maybe tomorrow you will get it, but if you're not ready for the job, the opportunity will come and go. So that is my point actually, that you have to upgrade yourself. I hope it will, clarify the question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think very valid point. And I think even Sriram wanted to answer this question. And Sriram, thank you, Athar. I mean, it was very well. I mean, I think Mohammad Rizwan would be happy on this response, because when the opportunity will arise, you'll have to be ready. It's not that opportunities are going to come for everyone. It's just that the matter of time when the opportunity does beckon on you, and you are just ready for it. I think Sriram also wanted to highlight this point.
Yeah, it's like the tire beating the road. That's what they would say. That's opportunity, and has to be ready. It has to be in. And number two is that organizations are looking for the ability of the people to unlearn. See, I've got a very peculiar situation of people in the mid 40s having a challenge because, and particularly in IT companies, when you look at it, there is a kind of a sense that, okay, are you willing to unlearn? Because there's going to be a lot of changes which are going to happening and which is already seeing. So if somebody says, no, I know all these things, and I think with this, I'm ready, organization is saying, okay, fine, for today, you're ready. But for tomorrow, if the situation has to come where you have to unlearn, are you ready for that? Have you demonstrated that in the past? Or are you willing to demonstrate it now? No, that is a very important thing which we need to learn. Because learning is far easier compared to unlearning. Yeah, that's what I would like to say. Yeah.
Perfect. I think Rizwan should be happy with the answer. In both the perspectives of Athar and Sriram was pointing out that when the opportunity would arise, you have to be for when the time would demand you to be in the better shape. From an anonymous attendee, is how to easily identify risks within processes, and also how to come with mitigating steps or appropriate recommendations for it. Specific areas within organizations that are hit due to COVID. I'd leave any of the panelists to want to answer this question. I think it was directed to Mitchell, I probably presume, but since Mitchell has unfortunately left, Sriram or Athar or Aleem, anyone would like to answer that question, or how do we take that?
Okay, I think, starting with Aleem could be in a better position to start with, because particularly regarding the IT element, I think he would be in a position to address, and as we go along, we can take it up.
Yeah,
that's what I'm feeling. Yeah.
So I think what Mitchell was also talking about were different types of risk, right? I can only talk about the IT risk. He was talking about, I think, economical risk, right? Socio-political risk and all that. But within an organization, if you think about it, one of the things that I'm sure, I'm forgetting whether it was Mitchell or, Athar who mentioned it, is about the importance of having the risk register, right? There has to be a hygiene. There has to be something you need to do. You need to do introspect, a very, very fair and a very, unbiased introspecting. And maybe you'd use a third party help, right? You get an expert from externally to have, them look at your environment, right? From an IT standpoint, there are teams like, which we typically call as red teams, right? You invite them to your organizations. They will scan through your networks, they scan through your environment to show what are the potential risks or vulnerabilities that you have, and then share that. So I think from my standpoint, the two things: one is the importance of having a risk register, or three, having to look introspectively. And if you need external help, get that external help. It could be any expert to look at your organization and identify the areas of improvement.
Yeah, one of the other things which I can add to it is a lot of importance is being now given to by a lot of management on corporate governance. You would not even believe that organizations are hiring third parties like me to train their employees on corporate governance, including the board. Because people, when they're not aware of the corporate governance policies, it could be IT policy, it could be anti-bribery or gift policy, it could be code of ethics, everything involves a risk. There is a public limited company where a whistleblower has come out and raised a concern a couple of days back. The stock fell down by 22%. Now, is this a risk involved for the company? Yes, there is a reputation loss also involved in the company. So if I can have a proper corporate governance, and if I can educate my people on the corporate governance, and any deviation on the corporate governance, if actions are taken, so that everybody in the organization knows that nobody is bigger than those corporate governance policies, that is one of the big methods of protecting or mitigating against the risk. Which
Yeah,
covers
I just,
everything.
sir, okay. I just want to add one actually point here, or maybe it can clarify more as well. I think Mr. Michel actually, he already, spoke a lot about the, the risk management, how to manage risk, how to identify risk. There are a lot of frameworks, as he discussed. There is ISO 31000, actually, he's certified for that. So there are, the risk management frameworks available that can, help to identify the risks as well, to assess those risks as well, to, to mitigate those risks as well, to, top up. In terms of this question, actually, specifically, I just want to share that, there are, some specific, procedures from just like identification to mitigation as well. Mitigation way, he told, actually, he mentioned already that, how you have to mitigate those risks, just like transfer. You can transfer the risk, you can accept the risk, you can just like, tolerate the risk as well. Somehow you can avoid the risk as well. So these are the risks. In terms of COVID, this thing in question, there are a lot of, the different technologies came into picture actually nowadays. So there are a lot of, online, one of the best, the hot risk I can say in terms of cyber security, what we have discussed in terms of COVID, that this is one of the biggest risk as well. Technological changes as well. This is one of the biggest risk as well, that, nowadays the organization they are facing every day, that, technologies are changing. So in terms of COVID, these risk, if we have to see that where the companies they are moving, so we online portals as well. So these are specific risk in terms of, the COVID. I hope this can, serve the, purpose for the question.
Perfect. I think, yes, I think most of the questions that the questioner had have been addressed. Then going on to the next question, it's been asked to Sriram. It says, how do you keep corporate culture alive? And I think in post-COVID times and all these things, it's very essential for us to see how corporate culture survives. So, Sriram, if you can answer that question, how does corporate culture stay alive in these times?
So again, one of the things which I talked about is the corporate governance. It continues with the same thing. Now, first and foremost, culture eats strategy for breakfast. First and foremost, all the CXOs must emphasize that what is the culture of this organization? What do we stand for? And what do we not stand for? A mission statement is not a statement to be hanging on the walls of the organization, on the website of the organization, but it should be practiced in sensitizing people on the culture. And the responsibility of the HR is now to look at how do we engage the people who are working from home or working from remote locations. What are the challenges they would be having in going away from this culture? And what are the actions that are need to be taken, and communicating the same? This is the most essential element. Revisiting the mission statement is important, and defining the culture is important, and the core values should be communicated. And at every stage, this is again a risk is involved. Every deviation from that is going to be a risk. So that also needs to be addressed. HR has a very important role to play. In fact, some of the people think that HR doesn't have a role to play from work from home culture. They have a huge role to play.
I think continuation to that, I think the question was asked to Aleem as well, and that how should people engagement be better managed if a work from home culture continues? I mean, and I think Aleem was talking about how we're going to go into a hybrid environment in the future. So in a corporate environment, how better can we enhance people engagement, or how do we keep them together?
Right. It's one of the biggest challenge for every organization who's now adopted to this hybrid workplace. And like Sriram was mentioning, it is a job of the HR, and also not just the HR, but I would also say the entire leadership team of an organization to ensure that they are in constant touch, with their people, right? Of course, there are different organizations who are trying to find innovative ways, right, of having, online fun events, right? Online collaboration events. There are different tools, that they can use to engage their employees. But also now in the future, hybrid, when I was talking about the hybrid workplace, and when people are trying to work more from home and not go to the office, there are talks about how do we repurpose the offices, right? It's not going to be that everybody will come to the office to spend the full hour work at the desk. Maybe the offices now are more social places for employees to get together once in a while, engage in a social, event or a discussion, and then get back to their homes which is now their primary job. So I think there are different organizations who are thinking out of the box in terms of trying to use this opportunity to interact. And again, like I said in the beginning, the role of the leadership is essential in ensuring that the team is feeling bonded at all times. I hope that kind of answered. Rekha, you're on mute. You're on mute.
I'm sorry. What should be the question would what should be the business strategy for small and medium scale industries or upcoming startups? It's again a very difficult question to answer, because the industries in which the startup would be operating are very varied, and different organizations, startups are operating in difficult, challenging times. I think Sriram can just quickly 30 seconds or 1 minute.
No, I would probably take a couple of minutes, okay?
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I've covered a chapter on my book on this.
Okay.
Because MSMEs is the worst hit. Because why? I'm reading it. The peculiar problem which MSMEs goes through is that all the businesses they take, they're pushed to take orders at a very low price with least margin and highest credit terms. This is the first thing. So which means if they run at 90% capacity, if they paid all the debts, if they service the debts, and if they pay the employee's salary and do the compliances, they do not have anything to take back home. This is the situation. MSME's problem is not because of COVID, it is much beyond that. I honestly feel, in fact, in my book, I've given a lot of suggestions where how MSMEs and the big brother attitude has to come from the big suppliers, all the companies across the world, okay, where they will have to protect their own suppliers, their own vendors, give them the line of credit, give them, L&T is an organization which is there across Asia and even across, world. They have a wonderful system. They have, like, say, for their channel partners, they have L&T Finance Division where they actually fund. Tata Capital used to do it. So that's one. MSMEs will have to be protected by the large manufacturers. And if they don't do it now, tomorrow the manufacturer will also land in the same problem as the MSME is landing today. I've also mentioned the same thing. Detailed strategies are given. Number two, MSMEs will have to have a proper lobbying by means of coming together through collaboration, which is not happening. See, you're a chartered accountant, Vikar. I don't know about others. I would always tell when people come to me for courses on valuation, they tell me, Sriram, the customer is asking for so many thousands of rupees or dollars. Now, I said, if all the chartered accountants say we will not do it less than this price, then to whom will the client go? It is only because when one chartered accountant says, okay, I will do it. Now you are opening the bag of worms and it is not going to work. So MSMEs will have to come together in every sector. Number two. Number three, the government has also taken steps. A lot of governments, I'm not talking about government of India, I'm talking about a lot of governments across the world have taken steps to protect the MSMEs by paying credit on time and everything. But most of the MSMEs do not even report if there is a default because they are afraid of orders coming from that particular company. So coming together in collaboration is very important. Number one. Startups. I see a question on startup also similar, right? Now, the biggest problem of startup is startups have been thinking that I have an idea and I go to the venture capitalist or a PE investor and he brings in the funds and my problem is solved. This is the biggest problem. Now, as long as, in fact, I told in one of the webinars I conducted also, if the startups are doing this, they are literally going with begging bowl and they will have to close down. Startups, the first thing they will have to look at is, who is my customer base? Can I build a customer base? If without building a customer base, they just have an idea and they want to go to a funding agency, it is not going to work. So their first thing will be to look at rapid customer acquisition. And they need help on that. And most startups do not take help on that, number one. Number two, I'll give you an example. Swiggy is a classic example. Swiggy is in India. They deliver food. What have they done? They opened up. They went and signed up with all the restaurants local. They brought them together. They made a community. And then they went and told the customers, advertised through various social media, that we can serve you food from here, we can serve you food from there, all those nearby locations. So they built a community. And when they had a community where they said, we have so many millions of customers, we have so many thousands of vendors, restaurant owners, now they did not have to go to the funding agency. Funding agency came to them looking at a very viable model. Same thing happened with even Oyo Hotels, which unfortunately failed for a different reason altogether. Okay, so moral of the story is look for customer acquisition. Convert that one-time customer into a community. That's the way forward going.
The only addition to that, the only addition I would like to make to that, and again, you're absolutely right to finding the customer. I also extend that by saying that you need to ensure that you're solving a problem. You know, having a great idea which does not solve a problem is not a good solution. So even when we look at internally to an IT organization or any organization, and if you have an idea that you want to implement a new solution, you want to implement, you build a new application, more, of course, having the customer is important, but you also need to solve a problem. If you're not solving a problem, even the best ideas would not work.
Absolutely.
Agreed. Totally agreed, Aleem. Yeah.
I think a couple of really very interesting conversations happening in the Q&A session. I think a couple of questions and then we can wrap it up. One question from Ahmed Hussein is saying, how are we looking at future jobs in any sector globally? And how much is it dependent on the COVID medicine, in your opinion? Who would like to take it up?
So I would go, especially in the IT industry, right? I think the future job market, and I think this is where a lot of discussion is happening, even in the HR community, is now that, you know, employees are remote, the geographies have opened up, right? Organizations are now today, you know, initially you would post a job openings and okay, this job is in a city, right? Now that even within companies right now, people have, you know, gone back to their homes, their native places, and still working, right? And that has, it's a double-edged sword, I would say, right? I mean, of course, from an, you know, it has opened up the geographies. It is good and bad because the competition has increased. You know, every organization has the more wider options, and the employees also, people also have now varied companies to apply or opportunities to apply to. So that is what I would say, that the geographies have, you know, the walls have been disappeared, you know, from a opportunity standpoint.
Can I go ahead? And wonderfully done, Aleem. I think, you know, that's what partner of Deloitte told me one thing. There used to be an advantage sitting in Mumbai. It is no more an advantage sitting in Mumbai. You are as good as whether you're in Mumbai or you're in a small town. As long as you're having internet connection, that's fine. In fact, Uday Kotak went on to tweet within 3 or 4 days after the lockdown started. He said, why should an IT company pay $300,000 to somebody sitting at home and working when the same resources are available in somewhere else at $100,000? True. Okay. And last thing, go ahead, Vikarek. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. I mean, the bigger question is it a good side for the employees or a bad side? Because now the Uday Kotak is saying for 300,000 thing, he can do it very well with the 100. Has it opened up Has it opened up emerging markets, or has it opened up highly skilled individuals to apply for different people, different jobs, or it's just a phenomena that can be grabbed by anyone?
No, I would say that, it is all question of now upskilling yourself. You will have to differentiate yourself from others. There are too many mediocre talents who were just because of experience, I'm available at that location, and they were demanding a huge price. Now what will happen is it will become a much more equal opportunity will be there. At the same time, one who has got a great skill will be paid a lot more than others. So it separates between the seed and the weeds. That's one simple example I can give you. Another one I would like to tell you is that gig economy is there right in front of our eyes. We are going to gig economy.
Okay. Gig
economy is a temporary contractual basis, consulting based jobs than a permanent employment. And in fact, in US, there was a prediction that 40% of movement of jobs will happen to gig economy by 2020. They predicted in 2015, but nobody knew that it is going to be the COVID which is going to trigger that. But it has triggered, and all of you, in fact, I don't know whether you're in Facebook watching or in webinar, small communities watching, spread the message. People must be flexible enough to move from a secured job environment to a gig economy where they may not have a permanent job, but they will have a specialized skill which they can use it on a temporary basis rather than looking for a permanent employment. This could be for an architect, this could be for a chartered accountant, this could be for anybody. Welcome to gig economy.
This is something that wonderfully actually explained by Mr. Sriram and Alim. The thing that relating to COVID, as Mr. Sriram discussed, this is opportunity. I have seen a lot of people that have gained a lot in this opportunity. Believe me, there are a lot of opportunities created. It doesn't mean that there are a lot of people. Of course, they have lost job, but there are thousands of the opportunities created as well in terms of as you mentioned, the people, they're sitting in the villages, they are doing the freelance activities, and they are doing the outsourcing activities in terms of so a lot of opportunities are still available in the COVID as well. You have to upgrade and upskill, as we discussed already, that you have to ready for the opportunity. Just like someone mentioned here about the Zoom, how much the utilization of the Zoom, it is if you compare Zoom in wealth, it is around it's more than one airline company nowadays, just like in terms of wealth. So because they were ready for the opportunity came and they grab it. So they are just like you can see in the Amazon, the guy is a owner of the Amazon, you can see he's in trillions. So this is the power of the upskilling, and if you're ready for the opportunity.
Yeah, one of the nice point, sir, I think I was just reading a meme yesterday saying that if you earn $10,000 a day, and if you are earning $10,000 a day since the time pyramids were built, then you would be only achieving 12% of his wealth as things stand. So so that gives an idea as to how much Amazon and Jeff Bezos has made in this times of COVID and the future beyond. I think we'll take a last question and then we can wrap it up. The question to Alim from Mohammed Rafiuddin that says, how critical or essential is it to have a good working relationship between compliance and infrastructure teams?
So thank you. And just to give a background, Mr. Rafi is my risk governance partner. And, he and I, the reason why he asked is also because it's very essential that the risk and governance and IT organizations are, working in collaboration, in tandem, right? And like, Mr. Athar was saying, that the risk and governance organizations cannot be seen as the police, right? Or the people who are just pointing out, things that you probably have to do, but really work in tandem, right? Because we all, I think, have a common objective, and that's what I think the mindset has to be between not just an internal audit, but the different functions of an organization. That the objective of the internal audit is the well-being, like you mentioned, Mr. Athar, what is the well-being of the organization, to see the organization being successful in the right way. So it's very important and very essential. If the IT and the risk governance team do not go along hand in hand, right, then it's either, it actually is a company's loss, but also the either, how do I say it, the functions loss, right? It's a loss for the compliance team. It's a loss in the long term for the IT as well, and for the overall organization. So I think it is very essential that the IT and the compliance are joined at the hip in all the things that we do.
Great. I think that pretty much answers the question. I think we'll not be taking any more questions. I'll give 30 seconds to 1 minute to each panelist to wrap up their statements, and if at all they want to give any parting thoughts, and post which we can just close this webinar. I'll start with Athar. If you can just give in your 30 seconds to 1 minute final takeaways, summaries, or that parting thoughts that you would like to add.
Yeah, okay. First of all, I would like to say thank you so much for this opportunity to spread the knowledge and whatever we know, actually, to just raise our voice for the people as well. And I learned a lot from, panelists as well, Mr. Alim, Michelle as well, and Mrs. Sriram. So this is a great, the time we spend it actually. And what I have, spread the message and, gave the message for the internal audit professionals and the activity, just like that in 2-3 simple, the words, we can say that if I have the same actually, objective, world is changing, you have to change yourself. If you will not change it, then the other one will, I cannot demotivate the people, but I want to say, if you will not change it, believe me, someone will change you. So that's why replace you, we can say that. Of course, I'm just saying replacing, but eliminate you. Of course, as you mentioned, the people, they are eliminating because they don't have the technologies. They don't learn the technology, new technologies, of course. So this is something I just want to say, work for the objective, for the the same objective with the same passion for the company, and upgrade yourself to achieve those objectives. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And really, really appreciate my heartfelt thanks to you for joining in and giving us so much insightful information about internal audit and risk management. Many of the WhatsApp chats have come to me for you to share that PPT that you have, and if you could share that, we could probably relate ahead. Going to Sriram, 30 seconds to 1 minute to give your final inputs and insights, what you feel would be the word.
Yeah, I would just like to say that there are two things which we have to look at. There are things which we can control. There are things which matter in our lives. Most of the things which matter in our life, we do not have any control. So what do we need to do is look at those things which you really have control and work on those areas. Because these are times where mental health is extremely important and critical. So I'm seeing a lot of people getting into depression, fundamentally because trying to change things which are not in their control, but which obviously matter to them. Every period has got a cycle which goes up and down. I don't know which path you are in at this point in time, but at any point of time, ask yourself this question: is it something which is in my control? If it is not in your control, hold on till it comes in your control and do those things which really are in your control. Act, and there you can see the change. And that's what Mr. Iqbal is talking about in terms of change. And which is in your control? Who is in your control? Not even your spouse, but you are in your control. So take care of that. Take care of yourself. That's it. Vikar is connected.
Well, I think is kind of frozen, so I will just give away my remarks, in the order of it. I think from my standpoint, and especially around the IT security, thinking that IT security and the security of an organization is the IT function's responsibility itself is a challenge. I think we all have to understand that it is every individual's right and every individual's duty to ensure that the organization is secure, right? It's just not the IT department's responsibility. It's every individual's responsibility. And I think I very much concur with what you're saying. It's about change. It's about what's in your control. I'm a big believer in controlling what you can, right? And not worrying about things that are out of control, right? Of course, the things that you can influence. So the whole circle of influence, I am a big fan of that philosophy. But yes, if it's in your control, acting right, acting responsibility, not clicking on an email that you shouldn't be clicking on, is your responsibility. And a small click can lead to a bigger issue. So that's my conclusion. IT security is not IT responsibility, is everybody's responsibility.
Thank you, Aleem. I'm sorry for I just had some connectivity issues and I just had gone and come back. Thank you, Sriram. Thank you, Athar. Thank you, Aleem. I mean, it's been really, and I really also want to thank Mitchell as well. It's been a very, very enlightening, very informative session, and most of the insights that have been shared by each of you have really impacted. I'm sure all the participants who've been hearing would take away a lot of good things from this webinar. I have learned a lot, and I really feel thankful to all of you for taking your time out. For giving us those beautiful insights into how do we work around this pandemic, and how do we better prepare ourselves for any emerging risk that can happen to any of us in the coming future. But along with that, tomorrow is a brighter day. Every dawn break comes up with its own opportunities. We better be prepared for it until we meet our own end. So I think on that note, I really again thank all the audience as well for the questions posed. It was a really good session that we had, and till next time, please do take care of yourselves. Please stay healthy, and do wear a mask and stay protected. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the panelists and Vikas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Bye.